and I want to welcome everyone today to our SILS Connection event, a new alumni virtual programming that we're offering for 2020. Today, I'd like to thank our speaker, Stephen Sherman, for joining us. A few minutes about your background, and then I know I have some questions, but I also want to open it up to people on the call for other questions.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Stephen. I'm glad to talk with you today. This is obviously the home office, so you get to see a little bit of the background. Being a library student, I have, graduate, I have to have books in the background. I've been having fun watching what everybody else has on their bookshelves. So I am in Atlanta. It's a little sunny. It's getting there. It's usually nice and warm here by May, so we're happy to get out and enjoy it when we can. Hopefully everybody else is staying safe and enjoying the home as much as you can. So I currently work with the Southeastern Council of Foundations. I work as a Director of Research and Data, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but I'll tell you more about what I do in a second. Basically, SECF is a membership association of grant-making foundations. So that would be the Duke Endowment, and we have the Woodruff Foundation in Atlanta, and a lot of the big names like the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation. Those are ones you might be more familiar with that are some of our members around the different region. But we cover 11 states from Virginia down to Florida, and out far as west as Arkansas, Louisiana, and then Kentucky. So we have something like 350 different organization members right now. And we provide professional development resources, reference service for these members. We provide lots of programming and training, and of course right now we're providing a lot of support just to help our members address the crisis around the region and support nonprofits and charities in all of our different states. So we've been busy, as you can imagine. I guess, Laura, you want me to say a little bit about my career path too up to this point? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
All right. So how I got here, and it's quite a path. I'm sure, as you can figure out, it's for a lot of people in philanthropy and a lot of people in our field. I came out of college with a BA in history, as a lot of you may also have. It's usually English or history. You end up in library science, right? So I came out not really knowing what I wanted to do with my full career. But my wife, not married at the time, of course, but we both came out of UVA. We were up in Virginia. We moved out to a small town in the southeastern part of the state, and there wasn't a whole lot in the area. The one place where I could get a full-time job was at a small liberal arts college right across the border in North Carolina. And that was working as a reference assistant, circulation ILL assistant, sorry. I ended up working in reference after that, but I was working as what we call paraprofessional. Stayed there for 3 years and ended up getting up to a point where I needed to, get a library degree before I could really progress any further. But I did I felt I enjoyed the field enough, enjoyed what I was doing, that I wanted to go out and get my MSLS degree. And then by that point, we had moved across the border into North Carolina, so UNC was a nice, easy choice. And that was, I think, back in 06, 08 was when I was at SILS. I ended up doing a number of different graduate assistantships and internships, including working at NC State in their brand new Learning Commons there when that was first opened. I also worked with the Friends of the Library there at NC State. Had a couple of jobs at UNC, and my biggest one was probably the internship with the EPA RTP library, which is how I ended up getting into special libraries. So up to that point, I had worked a number of different roles, interlibrary loan, circulation, reference, and what I liked about the EPA RTP library was they send you through a nice rotation. You get to go through all these different roles within the EPA library there and build on my experience while also kind of contributing, since I had some knowledge of how different parts of the library worked. But that was a really good entree to special librarianship, and got some good experience and some good connections there. So upon graduating, we had a choice. My wife had been getting her master's in history at NC State, and she was looking at some PhD programs, and we had a choice between Columbia, South Carolina, and Atlanta. And seeing how Columbia has its own library school, we figured our job prospects would be better here in Atlanta, so that's how we ended up down here in Georgia. And I ended up working part-time when I first got here at a community college library. There was a 2-year college. I was trying to find jobs anywhere because the market wasn't great at the time. This was 2008, right about that time when the economy was crashing. So I ended up working part-time for a while, and I think that was probably one piece of advice I'll give folks is you kind of have to take what you can. It may give you an entree into a full-time job eventually, but it doesn't hurt to have something to build your resume, whatever it may be, volunteer, part-time, or otherwise. So I did work there for a couple months, and I was fortunate enough to then get an interview and get a job with what was the Foundation Center. It's now called Candid. It's gone through a merger since then. But I worked as, it was at that point a reference librarian position. That was the actual title. But the Foundation Center is an organization, it's a nonprofit itself that provides information on grant seeking, proposal writing, grant writing, and other fundraising topics for nonprofits, not just in the U.S. but internationally, but that's where most of the offices are. It's based up in New York, but they had an office here in Atlanta, and it had a library. They had books that they would loan out to folks, so more of a traditional library sense, and they had computers, and people could come in and bring their own laptops or use the computers there and actually search for grant funding. So part of my job would be helping people find grants, figure out how to find what foundations might be a good fit for their nonprofits or what programs they were looking for. We also taught some classes on grant writing and grant seeking, so I got to use some of my information literacy education experience and just going through that presentation experience, which I think is always great to have. This kind of evolved after a while. We ended up doing more kind of research on how foundation giving was shaping up. My role changed a lot, so it went from just kind of helping people in the library, doing more traditional library things, to more of the data side, doing analysis of foundation giving, and we would actually take data. This is what the Foundation Center is really known for, is publishing, collecting all this data on foundation giving. We would get the data on Georgia, and we would publish a key facts report each year, showing who the biggest foundations were, where the money was going, what topic areas, and that's how I got more into data analysis and helping to craft some surveys of grant makers and those types of things. That also got me connected with SECF because they actually partnered on a number of surveys. There's the Southeastern Council of Foundations, where I work now, has a couple subgroups, one of which was the Georgia Grantmakers Alliance, which is more of a statewide network. And we did a number of different surveys with both that alliance, and there's a Georgia Center for Nonprofits, and I helped craft those surveys, the design, and do the analysis on those, and that got me a lot of experience in that area. So you never quite know where things are going to take you. And I was there with the Foundation Center, with Candid, for I think 8 years. And then SECF actually created a new role for this research and data position where I am now. And seeing as that I've worked with them for 2 or 3 years on some research and data projects, I felt like it was a natural fit. And I ended up applying and getting the job, and I've been with SECF now for 3 years, and we do a lot of research and data. I've actually worked on a couple of projects, so project management has come in. We work with a lot of consultants and to publish research on foundations and their operations and their giving. But I also, half of my job really is managing our membership database, since we are a membership association. So I'm also calling a lot upon my experience working with ILSs and other types of database. We've actually gone and done a database migration and built out our database a lot. So I've kind of become the expert on that area too. So my job right now is kind of half research projects and tracking data and reports in the field, and then half working with our membership team and our member database and doing a lot of reporting, a lot of querying there. So I'll stop there. That's a lot to throw at you.
Thank you. No, it was great. I had seen on LinkedIn, and then you confirmed it today again that my first job in North Carolina was the same place your first job in North Carolina was, at Chowan. So I thought that was funny.
Oh, yeah.
I'm much older than you, so we weren't there at the same time, but it has good memories of a place to get your foot in the door in North Carolina. So I thought that was great. I'll kick it off with a question, and then we'll make sure that anybody else can get their questions asked as well. But one of the things I wanted to ask, we have during this week, we'll have a number of alumni with library science degrees that are working in different settings. And so I wanted to ask, from your point of view, how intentional that was you in your career, and how much of it was just the way you were working through jobs and opportunities came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's rarely intentional. I'm always in shock when I see someone who comes in with a bachelor's in information science. But I think both getting to the point where I went for my MLS and then getting to where I am now, both of those were nothing I would have imagined when I was in college, or it's like if you go really far back in high school. I think it's been really beneficial just to take on new opportunities, because you never know quite where it's going to take you. And I've really enjoyed the path. But I think when I graduated from UNC, I always thought I was going to be an academic librarist. I thought I would be in reference or instruction or working as a history librarian. I applied a lot of places when I came out. Of course, you have to throw your resume out in a lot of different places. And I think what I found was, in order to really get a tenure track or kind of faculty level library position, you almost have to have a second master's degree, if you're going to work at a large institution. And I think I was a little turned off by maybe working in a role where I might be more focused on one particular aspect of librarianship. What I really enjoyed about working in both the small college library environment where I started out, and some of the internships that I had while I was at UNC, was just the variety of tasks and the variety of roles that I was able to fill. So that really drew me into special librarianship. Because you usually end up in a small organization or in a small department, and in a lot of cases, like I am, more of a solo role, where you're called upon to do lots of different things and fulfill lots of different roles. So you never know quite what your day may look like or your week may look like. And I love that variety. It keeps things fresh for me. Even if you come in the same office every day, or same home office every day, you still get to shake it up a bit and do some different things. And then when I said I first came to Georgia, I ended up working for a small community college library. At that point, I still thought I was going to be in reference and instruction, and I actually held on to that job for quite a while. I worked part-time, even though it was just weekends, for 5 or 6 years, because I never quite knew if I was going to go back into that academic, put my toe back into that field or that bucket. But with philanthropy, I really enjoyed it, and I never would have imagined. I had no idea what a foundation really was when I started the job with the Foundation Center, but you learn as you go. And I think that's part of it too, is just that the ongoing learning is always part of our profession, which is also keeping it fresh. And I worked there with the Foundation Center for 8 years, which is an eternity now, because a lot of people are moving around jobs much more than that. But I think it did give me a nice journey to where I am with SECF, and even here, I never thought I would be working with this organization, but when that opportunity came up, I definitely jumped on it. And I think it's similar with having one foot in this philanthropic field now. You see a lot of folks who end up working in foundations or working in nonprofits, never thought that they'd end up in that sector either, so it's very similar. But I think you just have to be open to those opportunities and be open to saying yes, of course with some discretion, but being open to have those, being adventurous and being open to have those explorations.
Great. I'll take a breath and see if any of our students I don't think we have any students on the call. They're all alumni. So any questions, I'm happy to read out of a chat, or if you want.
Hi, Stephen. I'm Lemmy. I just finished my MSIS, and I'm interested in special libraries. I have an internship set up for this summer working with North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and that is a special library that I wouldn't have considered otherwise. It's not like an obvious thing. It just sort of like came up in a listserv or something like that. So I was wondering, like, how did you find the Foundation Center job? Like, if you didn't know what foundations were or what they did, how did you come across it?
I think I came upon it through the Georgia Public Library Service. They have a job board here, so it wasn't terribly hidden. But I know that some of those things are out there where you may not come upon them that obviously. One thing I did do, not necessarily for the Foundation Center job, but for when I first got to Georgia, when I was job hunting, I ended up going to the State Library Conference. They have that in October every year. And I did a lot of networking there, which I think was helpful. So getting plugged into those networks, if you know where you want to end up geographically, that's always helpful. If not at the national level. And I haven't put my plug in yet for the Special Libraries Association, but I'm active there too. And that may be a place that if you're not already joined up, you can get a nice student rate there, I think, even if you're just newly graduated. So taking advantage of those networks where you can get connected with some other folks already in the field and get some personal connections. Those personal touches always help, even if it's just reaching out to someone on LinkedIn just to get some introductions or have a name, someone that you know where you want to go or what field that you're in or with the organization you want to be at is always great. And I think when I came to the Georgia Libraries Conference here, it had a different name at that point, but I ended up meeting a couple folks who were actually at the library where I was hoping to get that part-time job. So I had a couple names, some faces I knew when I actually went to interview. So I think that did help, and I was able to ask them some questions about the job, so I had a better feel for what it would involve and some comfort level. And with the Foundation Center job, I think it goes back to doing what we do best, which is research and just knowing where to look. And the number of sites that I know I keep a regular tab on when folks are asking me about jobs. There's the I Need a Library Job site, and then there's, like I said, the state library site. Most states will have some sort of job posting, which is always good. And then just knowing what search terms are out there. But I think it is interesting now because, of course, there aren't as many roles that are going to have that word library or librarian in them, so you have to be creative about it. And looking at different search terms, and data and research are going to be in that title as opposed to library. So there's a lot more of that. Going back to what else was I going to say? Well, at networking with SLA, I was going back to that point. That goes back to what I was saying about being open to opportunities. I've been involved in a couple leadership roles with our Georgia chapter of SLA, and it might have been things I would have been cautious about and said, well, I'm not sure if I have the time to do that, but it's gotten me to meet a lot of new people and a lot of interesting career paths in the field, and I've got a nice little network, and I've actually now gotten involved at the national level with SLA, which I didn't think I would be maybe even qualified for, but you realize once you get there, you've got the experience and the expertise that you can lend. So even at an early stage in your career, don't be afraid of volunteering for any sort of opportunities like that might get you some experience that can then help with your career path.
So some jobs that have titles like research analyst, they could be actually useful intended for a librarian type role in a special library, but couldn't they also be roles that are more subject specific, working in a lab, you need clinical experience and you're doing deep data about specific lab research studies or whatever? I think that I'm having trouble figuring out the search terms of what research analyst, which one is going to be for special libraries or not. So that was really helpful what you just said.
Want to unmute yourself? Yeah, and unfortunately, HR people do not have any kind of universal. So they'll use the same term many different ways, just because of whatever their vernacular is. So I do think it's hard to, you might have to get to other search terms in addition to that to narrow it down, or not be disappointed when you're picking and choosing between those different roles.
Yeah, I think what you have to look at is really the qualifications and the skill sets that they're looking for, because it's much more of that than whatever the title might be. I find a lot of things translate, a lot of things that we as library science students or librarians may do translate into other fields pretty easily. As an example, in fundraising, I run into a lot of people who have MLSs or relevant or related degrees that they end up working in what we call prospect research, where they're finding information on individuals who may be potential donors for an organization. So they're using the same skills of database search and queries and just knowing where to find information that then translate pretty easily just into tracking people down and looking at giving capacity and writing up donor profiles. And you wouldn't necessarily think of fundraising as a field that a librarian might go into, but it really is a nice fit.
I think that leads into kind of a question that I have. I was looking at your grant writing background. Right now, I am volunteering with an organization called Digital Durham, and we are looking to apply to the IMLS CARE grant that's just come out. And we are hoping to partner with a library system in order to do this. And one of the things that I've been wondering about is, as you're writing these grants, a lot of I think with this particular one, we are looking to form partnerships in order to move forward. So I guess what I'm thinking about is how in grant writing do those partnerships begin? Do you begin that groundwork well before? Basically, how do you do that kind of networking in order to get the grant writing foundation that you need to develop the team, basically?
Mm-hmm. I think the earlier you get those partnerships going, the better. When foundations are looking at those types of proposals, they're looking for evidence that those partnerships are strong and they're built on a good foundation. So any sort of history that's there is going to be helpful. Beyond that, if it is just a new partnership, I think they're going to look more at the history of the organizations themselves. So even if it's a new partnership, it's how long has the nonprofit and how long has the library system been active in providing whatever services or programs you might be looking for support for. It does help if you have a written agreement, something like a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, or a document that lays out what that partnership is and who has what roles, responsibilities there are for each organization. That just shows there's more intention to the partnership. There's been some thought to how that's going to work out. So as a foundation, I think you'd be more trustworthy of that partnership. So to be able to trust that they'll be able to carry out that collaboration, be able to carry out those programs and those services. So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Stephen, I had another question. Oh.
Is it? Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I think okay. I just wanted to say hello to everyone on the call. I was on yesterday as well. I'm Ann, I work in SILS development. And I got to meet Stephen when I went down to Atlanta a few months ago. So I'm excited to learn more from you guys and then also to bring our alumni and students together. But as Stephen was talking about careers in philanthropy and fundraising, I just wanted to make you guys aware we actually have those types of jobs at Carolina. Prospect researchers, we actually probably think our team of prospect researchers for fundraising for Carolina alums and foundations and organizations is a team of maybe 6 to 10 people. But that's just UNC. Duke is going to have a much larger team and others. So if there are ever jobs that you see within development that would be sort of on university websites, obviously we have many in the area, and you have any interest in that, then please just email me. I'm right in SILS. Normally I would be on the ground floor if we were normal, but I'm here now. And so you can always contact me and I would love to be a network for you if you're looking at anything in the fundraising arena. So.
Thank you, Anne. I was going to follow up with Katie's question about building a team for collaboration for grant writing, and I was going to flip it more at the individual level. I think job searching overall, but then especially in the fundraising world, is so relationship building. Stephen, did you have any suggestions for new professionals on what has worked well in terms of building their network or growing their network? I know sometimes that's the hardest thing of like, what's intrusive, what is expected. You know, can you do a 15-minute Zoom coffee chat? Is that reasonable, or what would your opinion be on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you know, going back to the way I've done it, I guess, is through those professional associations. I'm your classic introvert, so I'm going to be hesitant to go out and go shake hands or go to a lot of networking events. But I do think you kind of have to force yourself to do that too. Even I probably shouldn't say force, but there's probably a kinder term to that. But you have to put yourself out there. So when you're going to conferences or you're going to any sort of events where there's going to be people in the field that you want to be in, or people that you think might give you those connections, you have to make yourself available. So don't be afraid to go out and shake some hands and meet some people. And some of those will pay off. Some of those, it's not necessarily going to be the most beneficial, or you may not be immediately beneficial, but you never know, and it might help you down the road. So I think getting to as many of those events as you can, of course now it's a little bit harder, but virtually, of course, getting plugged into those professional associations so you can meet others in the field. And we're a very helpful profession, so you know, we're always going to be available if people have questions, or if you need a link to something. We're also connectors, so I think we love to make connections between different people, either in our field or outside of our field. So whenever I'm trying to get a question asked about a particular organization, or you know, if I'm having a lot of trouble finding the data that I need, I look for the library. I look for someone in that research profession, because I know that they're going to have that helpful mentality. So take advantage of the fact that we are in a profession that people usually have that helpful mindset. LinkedIn, of course, is a great resource. You can find a lot of those connections there and look for who is in a particular role or with an organization, and weaving those connections from one person to the other. But I think getting involved in things like SLA or ALA or GLA, and we have a couple more local associations where I still go to a lot of events, because I never knew who I'm going to meet, and I run into folks who are in different special libraries in our area who you know, I end up calling upon for different needs, information needs, or just for different professional connections. And I may not have seen that when I actually met them, but I hold on to business cards, and that way I make little notes, and you know, doing your homework, keeping track of those. And I think saying thank you notes and sending little personal notes whenever you meet somebody, it helps too, just to reinforce that connection. So it's doing a lot of those little things that you know, your HR person or your student support will tell you. It's about those personal relationships, so taking the time to build those and send some quick notes. Handwritten notes, when you can do that, of course, are great. When you end up doing an interview or meeting with someone, and keeping up those personal connections into the future, because you never know when you might you know, want to call upon someone.
What is working at a special library like the sort of people that you help, and how do they interact with you?
Good question. Definitely depends on your environment. When I was with the Foundation Center, we were actually open to the public. So we had a physical library, and like I said, we would check out books and people would come in and use it. We weren't, well, I guess we should say we moved locations too. So in there, we were in a place once, we were more open to everything else, and we actually had some issues of, you might find more in a public library where you're having to deal with people kind of walking in and not knowing who you are and trying to use a computer for other different reasons. So that was probably the downside of being more public and being more transparent. We ended up moving to another building, another location where we were a little more closed off, and people had to go through more of a sign-in process to get to us, and that's kind of more like what I had at the EPA. so a little bit more of a targeted audience. But we were still not only open to the public, so we had to you have more of a public librarian mindset. You have to be mindful about access and handling questions. Really anything could walk in the door at any moment, so you never know quite what people are going to be coming and looking for. It could be, even though we were very specialized, it was still the case where someone could be looking for funding for a nonprofit, they could be looking to start a nonprofit, they could be looking for scholarships or grants for their education. They could be calling looking for financial assistance for personal needs, for rental assistance, and we had to know where to direct them. So more of being a jack of all trades and knowing how to direct people at that point. So that was, I guess, not knowing what's going to come in the door and being prepared to answer different types of questions in that environment. Where I am now is totally different. We're a membership association, so we have a much more defined, patron body, and they're all pretty much grant-making foundations, so they're going to be looking for some much more specific things. And our offices, when we were in our offices, weren't the kind of thing where someone's just going to walk in off the street with a question for you. So we were doing a lot more by phone and by virtual and by email, of course. And that was a big transition for me, because I did enjoy having that interaction with the public, and it was allowed me to kind of call upon my experience with education and doing that kind of teaching moment, walking them through how to find these resources and use our library, which I'm not doing as much now, but I think you find some other outlets for that. So I do get to do still some presentations for our members. I get to write some blogs, and I get to collect information on our research. So I've just found different ways that I can do those things that I like and I enjoy. And so sometimes you have to be a little bit creative about it, but you can always find some way to draw upon those skills, those things that you enjoy and that you want to bring out in your job. And that's kind of what since this role is new, it was created right before I applied for it, I've gotten the chance to kind of craft what's involved. So I get to propose some ideas. If there's something that I think that might be beneficial to our members that I think I'll enjoy, I can put that out there to my boss.
In those presentations that you mentioned, does it sometimes feel like you're pulling teeth to get people to come or listen?
I think when you're teaching about grants, it's never that hard to get an audience.
Okay.
Especially if you're teaching about grant seeking. My favorite class I think that I taught was the how to start a nonprofit, because you got a lot of people who just were starting as a blank slate, had no idea what a nonprofit involved, and really got to do a lot of teaching from the ground up. And I've always enjoyed that part, kind of sharing the information. With foundations, it's different. I have a lot of folks who are members who have a lot more experience in the field than I do, so it can be a little bit intimidating to come into a room and have 100 different foundation folks sitting there waiting to learn about what the fundraising trends are, because a lot of them, they know that already, so I may or may not be bringing them something new. So I've never quite had that issue, but I know there are definitely, when we talk about research and data, sometimes that will turn people off. So trying to get a good audience, it's a matter of kind of crafting the message and the marketing part of it, which we're fortunate. We have our membership who's pretty good at showing interest in those things and the trends in the field. And I've done some webinars where you're sitting there and there's silence when there's questions, and just having thrown a lot of numbers out there. But I think you do have to do a job of crafting that draw and making the connection between whoever your potential audience might be and the information that you're planning to present. We've been fortunate. We've actually got to work with a consultant at SECF who's done some work with us on our presentations, mainly for our board presentations, but it's been very helpful for other things. But she's taught us a number of techniques, and I think the biggest thing was just starting with the end in mind, knowing what you want to teach or present, or what you want to your audience to take away from your presentation, and then working back from there to the actual content. And she has a nice little worksheet where she it kind of forces you to drill down to what is really going to matter from this presentation. What is really the goal of this presentation? Where you may start off saying, well, it's to share this data. Well, why am I sharing this data? Is it to help them know where to give grants more effectively? Is it to help them know what the needs are in their communities? But once you drill down to that point, that's going to really help you make the case for why someone should come to that presentation or why someone should listen. And I think those presentation skills, those are invaluable. Whatever job you're in, that's always going to be helpful. So I was grateful to get a lot of opportunities. Even before I went to library school, I was actually getting to teach some information literacy instruction, even if it was just a lot of first-year students, your basic information literacy classes, but you learn a lot about how you can get their attention there, and you get a lot of repetition because, of course, there's a lot of those classes. And I did a lot of that with NC State too when I was in SILS. But I've never regretted those decisions or those opportunities. That was always helpful.
Anyone have a last question or two before our time is up today?
I do, but I'll leave it to Katie if she wants to ask another one.
I feel like all my questions are too specific to be helpful for the group. I'm just thinking about like the grants that I'm looking at right now and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna hold off. Go for it, Lenny.
Okay. With smaller like teams, like if you are the single librarian in like a special library, like how social is it? Like, how do you get support if you have questions, or how do you feel being a single person in the room, not working with the teamwork and the like connections you make with your regular daily work? How is the social aspect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely times where now in my current role where there'll be things that come up, initiatives or programs, and I'm trying to explain how a database works, and I forget that I'm working with people who don't have that LIS background, so I kind of have to start from the basics and build up. And we're actually doing something now where we've added Overdrive and their ebook service now for our members as a member benefit. So I'm happy because I get to do some library things, right? Get to work with some folks in my field, but it can be some work sometimes to try to communicate how these resources work and the kind of basic concepts of how we create a lending guidelines and lending policies. A lot of those basic things that we talk about in library school that you don't think you might have to actually draft someday, but when you're in a special library, it's doing it for the first time, you've actually got to think through all these broader concerns of, well, do we give them 3 weeks, 2 weeks, or do we limit to 2 books, or all those little questions. And I think when I have those types of situations and I'm trying to figure out how to find an answer, how I should find a model policy, or how I should think through these issues, I'll lean on those professional associations, so SLA a lot, and particularly the people that are close to me geographically that I've built those relationships with. I know that I can call upon them because they run into some similar situations, or may just know who else I need to talk to. But that's why I stay plugged in with SLA, and to some extent GLA, our state association, has been helpful, but those listservs, they're so basic, but they're so helpful when you have a quick question. I remember asking questions about our book club, because we're now starting a book club through Overdrive, so I was getting a lot of feedback on just what platforms people were using, what types of programming, and I just sent some quick messages out and got what feedback I could there, because that was even something it's not just special libraries, it's public libraries, it's academic libraries, so I still am a member of those broader library associations because I know that I can draw upon them for those types of questions.
And related to socialness, like who do you have lunch with? Yeah.
Oh, we have so our team here at SECF. We're right now 10 people, 12 at most. So we're a small organization relatively, but we do cover 11 states, so we're always busy. But we're such a small office, that we have the one room. If we're in the office, we'll go and grab lunch together. We do a lot. My boss is pretty good about, president's pretty good about having our staff meetings regularly, and we do have a Monday production meeting, so we're always getting together, and the office is nice and close-knit, so that if we need something, I want to talk to somebody, I'll pop down the hallway, never too far away. I imagine a larger organization that might be more of a struggle, especially if someone's working more from home or virtually. I can tell you right now, we still do most of our meetings as a full staff, just through Zoom, but we're still trying to keep up a lot of those connections. And I like the part of my job that I like too, in terms of just physical location, is we were downtown Atlanta, so I have a lot of my connections are just a 5 or 10 minute train ride away. So if I want to grab lunch with someone, I'll do that. And I'm fortunate to have some good connections where I have folks they'll want to grab lunch or something like that pretty regularly. And it's a nice release valve when you want to vent about your non-librarian colleagues, or they can be your sort of support group. So that definitely is helpful to get out of the office every now and then and do something. And there's a lot of evening events I would go to with SLA. So as busy as things might be, I'd still try to get out to some of those networking events or other things. Any other questions? If folks want to email me afterwards, I'm happy to share my contact info through Lori or otherwise, and feel free to reach out, and I'm glad to talk with everybody.
Thank you so much. Your answers were so helpful.
Thank you, Stephen. This was great.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Steve.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.